A 4,500-year-old mystery stands silent in the desert. How did humans move 2 million stone blocks, each weighing more than an elephant, into a perfect geometric mountain without cranes or computers? By the end of this journey, you will understand the real story of the pyramid builders, a tale of brilliant engineering and immense human organization that is more incredible than any myth. We will uncover how they cut stone with copper tools, and why they might have poured water onto sand to move impossibly heavy loads. What does it truly take for a civilization to leave a mark that lasts for millennia 4,500 years ago? A city of builders rose in the shadow of the rising pyramid. The workers were not slaves driven by whips, but a highly organized national workforce of Egyptians. The evidence for this is written in the dust and stones of a place called Hayt el-Ghurab, the lost city of the pyramid builders, discovered near the Giza Plateau. This was not a prison camp, but a purpose-built town with bakeries, breweries, and even a medical facility, where archaeologists have found evidence of successful bone setting and complex surgeries. These workers were well fed, receiving a daily diet of bread, beer, and fish, a protein-rich menu that fueled the most ambitious construction project in human history. The workforce was structured with a military-like precision, organized into teams that bore proud names like the Friends of Khufu or the Drunkards of Menkaure. This was a hierarchy of labor, with skilled artisans and stonemasons overseeing the work of thousands of laborers. They did not toil year-round without rest. Their work was tied to the heartbeat of Egypt itself, the Nile River. During the annual inundation, when the fields were flooded and farming was impossible, the farmers became builders. They would rotate in for seasonal shifts, a system that kept a steady stream of labor flowing to the construction site, while ensuring the country's agricultural base was maintained. The sheer logistics of feeding this army of workers is its own monumental achievement. The state established massive, centralized food production centers. Archaeologists have uncovered enormous bakeries capable of producing thousands of loaves of bread every single day, and vats for brewing vast quantities of beer, which was a dietary staple and a source of safe hydration. Huge quantities of fish from the Nile were salted and processed to preserve them. This was not just a construction project. It was a nation-defining enterprise that unified the entire country, drawing people and resources from every nome or province to achieve a single, glorious goal. So the real question becomes not how you move a stone, but how you inspire and organize thousands of people to do it together for generations. But with a workforce mobilized and fed, the monumental task truly began at the source, the quarries. Before a single stone could be placed with perfect precision, it had to be wrested from the living earth. This first step required a deep understanding of the stone itself. The Egyptians primarily used two types of rock. For the pyramid's dazzling white outer casing, they traveled to the quarries at Tura, selecting the finest, purest limestone. For the immense inner chambers and sarcophagi, demanding unparalleled strength, they sourced granite from the distant southern quarries near Aswan, a journey of hundreds of miles down the Nile. The tools they used seem almost impossibly simple against the scale of their ambition. There were no diamond-tipped drills. To extract the granite, workers used balls of dolerite, a stone harder than granite itself. Teams of men would pound these dolerite hammers relentlessly against the bedrock, not to pulverize it, but to exploit its weaknesses. They worked along natural fissures in the stone, repeatedly striking the same line to create a controlled fracture. For the softer limestone and for finer detailing, they employed copper chisels. While copper is a soft metal, It can be hardened by repeated hammering, and with enough patient, skilled force, it can slowly carve its way through stone. The extraction process was a masterclass in patience and leverage. Workers would first use their tools to carve deep, narrow trenches around all four sides of a desired block, effectively isolating it from the bedrock below. Once the block was free on its sides and bottom, the real challenge began. How do you lift a multi-ton block from its socket in the ground? The answer was likely wooden levers. Teams would insert levers into the narrow trench, using smaller stones as fulcrums, and heave in unison to pop the colossal block free from its ancient bed. The evidence for this entire arduous process is still visible today. In the Aswan quarries lies the unfinished obelisk, a colossal needle of granite that cracked and was abandoned during its extraction. It remains partially attached to the bedrock, a frozen snapshot of the quarrying technique, with the trenches and tool marks perfectly preserved. Across the quarry landscapes, you can find blocks marked with the names of the work crews, the same proud teams we met in the workers' city. This was just the beginning. Freeing the block was only the first victory in a long, slow war against weight and distance. Once a block was freed from the quarry, the even greater challenge of movement began. How do you transport a stone heavier than a modern truck across miles of desert? The answer lies in a simple yet brilliant technology: the wooden sledge. Ancient tomb paintings show teams of laborers hauling colossal statues on these sledges. But the paintings hold a crucial detail: a man standing at the front of the sledge, pouring liquid onto the path directly in front of the runners. For a long time, this was seen as a ceremonial act, but physics provides a more practical explanation. Dry sand piles up in front of a dragging sledge, creating a massive, immovable berm. Wet sand, however, behaves completely differently. Laboratory experiments have confirmed that just the right amount of water creates capillary bridges between the sand grains, locking them together and dramatically reducing friction. This turns the path from a stubborn barrier into a hard, slick surface, effectively cutting the pulling force required by half. This was not magic. It was fundamental physics applied with incredible ingenuity. Archaeologists have found the remains of these very roads, the ceremonial causeways that stretched from the Nile to the pyramids, their surfaces worn smooth by countless journeys. The operation on land, however, was only one part of a grander logistical network. For the immense granite blocks from Aswan, the Nile River was the only viable highway. These stones, some weighing up to 60 tons, traveled a journey of nearly 500 miles. They were loaded onto specially built, massive barges. The discovery of a papyrus logbook, written by a foreman named Mara during the reign of Khufu himself, gives us a stunningly direct window into this process. Mara details his crew's mission, transporting brilliant white limestone blocks from the Tura quarries to the Giza Plateau. His writings describe how the stones were loaded onto boats and sailed downstream, a journey that took several days. He even notes the regular delivery of food supplies for his work gang, connecting the dots back to the vast provisioning system we discussed earlier. Imagine the coordination required for this aquatic ballet. Teams had to first maneuver the blocks onto the barges without capsizing them, a task demanding an intuitive, if not formal, understanding of buoyancy and weight distribution. Once loaded, skilled sailors would navigate the currents of the Nile, a journey fraught with its own perils. Upon arrival at a specially built harbor near the pyramid base, the entire process had to be reversed, carefully offloading the precious cargo onto sledges to begin the final, slow pull up the causeway. This was not a series of isolated tasks, but a perfectly synchronized symphony of land and river, all orchestrated without a single written blueprint. relying instead on generations of accumulated knowledge and a shared national purpose. Moving the stones was one thing, but the ultimate mystery still loomed above. How did they then lift these multi-ton blocks hundreds of feet into the sky, stacking them with near-perfect precision? The final and most breathtaking challenge was the ascent. How do you lift stones to the height of a 40-story building? The most widely accepted answer is a structure almost as grand as the pyramid itself, a massive ramp. These were not simple inclines, but colossal engineering projects built from mud brick, limestone chippings, and compacted desert clay, erected directly against the pyramid's growing sides. Egyptologists have proposed several designs, each a fascinating solution to the puzzle of height. A single long straight ramp, built from the ground and stretching for nearly a mile, would have provided a constant, direct route. Yet its sheer volume of material would have been staggering, rivaling the pyramid's own construction effort. A zigzag ramp, switchbacking up one face, would have been shorter but presented a different problem: the difficulty of maneuvering heavy sledges around sharp corners. The most efficient design, and the one many experts now favor, is a spiraling ramp that wrapped around the pyramid's exterior, a corkscrew of earth and brick climbing towards the summit. This design minimized the amount of ramp material needed, but it created a new logistical snarl. As the pyramid grew, the inner corners of this spiral would have become impossibly tight for the long teams of laborers pulling their heavy loads. So how did they get the stones around those bends? The debate is far from settled. Some argue for a combination, perhaps a straight ramp for the massive lower courses and a spiral for the final, precise upper layers. The frustrating and thrilling part of this mystery is the lack of definitive proof. These ramps were temporary structures, dismantled after the pyramid was complete. Yet we have tantalizing clues. At the bent pyramid in Dasha, built just before the Great Pyramid, archaeologists have found the substantial remains of a ramp system, its core still intact. This tells us the ramp theory is not just a modern guess. It was a real physical tool in the ancient Egyptians' arsenal. But even with a ramp, the final act of placing the capstone, the very peak of the pyramid, at such a dizzying height, remains one of the most awe-inspiring feats to envision. The ramp debate takes a fascinating turn with a theory that places the final ascent not on the outside, but deep within the pyramid's heart. French architect Jean-Pierre Houdin proposed a radical idea that the Great Pyramid was built with a straight external ramp for its lower third, and then a spiraling internal ramp for the rest. This internal corkscrew, hidden within the pyramid's own structure, would have allowed workers to haul blocks upward from the inside. It elegantly solves two long-standing puzzles. First, it explains the absence of the enormous amounts of debris that a massive external spiral ramp would have left behind. Second, it accounts for how construction could continue efficiently, sheltered from the elements, and without the need to constantly rebuild an external support system. The mechanics are ingenious. As the team pulled a block up the internal tunnel, they would have faced tight corners. Houdin suggests the builders incorporated small, open notches at these corners, essentially creating a temporary open space. Here, a small team could use levers to pivot the massive stone 90 degrees, navigating it from one straight section of the internal ramp to the next, a slow but steady process. This theory has been tested with the tools of our time. Using three-dimensional computer simulations, engineers have modeled the entire construction process based on Houdin's plans, and the virtual pyramid was built without a hitch. Even more compelling are the real-world investigations. Microgravimetry, a technique that measures tiny variations in density within a structure, has been used to scan the Great Pyramid. The results revealed a curious, less dense spiral pattern within the monument, a pattern that matches the predicted path of an internal ramp. Yet despite this tantalizing evidence, the theory remains hotly debated. Many Egyptologists are skeptical, pointing out that no physical entrance to such an internal ramp has ever been found, and they question whether the notches would have been strong enough to support the turning maneuver. This clash of ideas is what keeps the mystery alive, a modern scientific detective story unfolding within a 4,500-year-old puzzle. So if the stones were moved into place with such incredible precision, how did they achieve such stunning accuracy without modern tools? The pyramid's ascent relied on a foundation of absolute perfection. Before the first stone was ever set, the Egyptians faced a critical task, leveling a 13-acre limestone plateau to create a perfectly flat base for the Great Pyramid. Their method was as simple as it was brilliant. They cut a grid of shallow trenches across the bedrock, filling this network with water to create a giant, natural level. By measuring down from the water's surface at any point across the entire site, they could ensure the bedrock was shaved down to a uniform height. The result is a margin of error of just over 2 centimeters across that vast area, a feat of accuracy that would challenge modern engineers even with laser technology. With a perfectly flat canvas established, the next step was even more crucial, squaring the pyramid's corners and aligning its sides with the 4 cardinal directions. The Egyptians almost certainly used a tool called a merkit, a palm-sized instrument made from a central bar with a plumb line and a forked sight. An astronomer priest would set up 2 of these devices, aligning their sights on a specific star as it rose or set. By marking the points where these star alignments intersected, they could trace a true north-south line with astonishing precision. The Great Pyramid is aligned to true north with an error of just 1/15 of a single degree, a deviation so tiny it is barely measurable. This obsessive attention to geometry was not for show. It was the very key to the pyramid's survival for millennia. A foundation that was even slightly uneven would have caused the immense weight of the stones to shift and settle unevenly, leading to catastrophic collapse long ago. Every block that was laid, every course that was added, depended entirely on the unwavering truth of that initial square and level base. This was not merely construction. It was the application of a profound understanding of the earth and the sky, locked into stone for all time. So with a perfect foundation laid and a flawless geometric plan in place, how did they then translate this abstract perfection into the physical reality of millions of individual stones, each one needing to fit with its neighbor to within a fraction of a millimeter? With the foundation set in geometric perfection, the pyramid began to rise not as a solid mountain of perfect stone, but as a carefully engineered structure of 2 distinct halves. The outer shell you see in your mind, the one made of pristine, finely cut blocks, was only the final skin. Inside, the pyramid's heart was a pragmatic masterpiece of efficiency. The core was filled not with uniform blocks, but with a rough rubble of locally quarried stone, a chaotic-looking mix of limestone chunks, desert gravel and sand, all packed tightly together between retaining walls of slightly better masonry. This was not a sign of cutting corners, but of brilliant resource management. Why spend weeks perfectly shaping a block that would never be seen, when a rough, strong stone from a nearby quarry would do the same job just as well, buried forever within the structure? This rough core provided immense mass and stability at a fraction of the labor and time, allowing the builders to rapidly achieve height and volume. The true architectural genius was in the system of retaining walls. These were like the bones of the pyramid, a grid of stronger, more carefully laid stones that created large internal compartments. The builders would then pour the rubble fill into these compartments, compacting it down to create a solid, immovable mass. This method transformed the pyramid from a simple stack of bricks into a single, unified structure, where the rough interior and the precise exterior worked together to distribute the unimaginable weight. The evidence for this clever duality is written in the ruins of other, less fortunate pyramids. At the Maiden Pyramid, a catastrophic collapse exposed its internal skeleton, revealing the stark contrast between the rough core and the fine outer casing. Similarly, at the Great Pyramid itself, the great robber pits torn into its sides by caliphs searching for treasure show the same story. A jumbled interior of local stone waiting behind the now missing smooth facade. This was not a secret, but the logical heart of the operation, a testament to an engineering philosophy that balanced ideal forms with practical reality. The final act was to cloak this rugged interior in a suit of dazzling white. The casing stones, quarried from the finest Chora limestone, were precision cut to form the pyramid's iconic smooth slopes. Each one was angled and polished to interlock perfectly with its neighbors, creating a continuous, shimmering surface that reflected the desert sun. This outer skin was the final piece of the puzzle, transforming a giant, efficient rubble pile into a perfect geometric mountain, a symbol of precision hiding a core of pure, brute strength. This final skin transformed the pyramids from immense piles of stone into true geometric miracles. Originally, the Great Pyramid was not the stepped brown structure we see today, but a breathtaking spectacle of light. Its entire exterior was clad in highly polished, brilliant white Chora limestone. Each casing stone was cut with such exacting precision that the joints between them were almost invisible, narrower than the edge of a coin. When the sun struck this vast, angled surface, the pyramid did not merely sit in the landscape. It actively participated with the sky, gleaming like a colossal jewel. It would have been visible for miles, a shimmering beacon of pure white light against the blue desert sky and the green Nile Valley, an otherworldly sight meant to represent the rays of the sun god solidified on earth. The process of creating this perfect facade was a masterpiece in itself, the final and most delicate phase of construction. The stones were quarried with immense care at Chora, transported on the Nile by crews like that of the foreman Mara, and then hauled up the ramps. But how were they placed with such flawless accuracy? The most logical method was to set them from the top down. As the massive external ramps were carefully dismantled layer by layer, stonemasons would work behind this disappearing scaffold, precisely fitting and polishing the casing stones on their way back down to the ground. This ensured that the pristine white surface was never scarred by the messy process of ramp removal, preserving its perfect finish all the way to the base. It is a profound loss that we can only imagine this original splendor. Over centuries, nearly all of these dazzling casing stones were systematically stripped away. Following a massive earthquake in the 14th century that loosened many of the blocks, the stones were quarried all over again, this time to build mosques and fortresses in Cairo. The rough, stepped core we see today is merely the pyramid's skeleton, stripped of its beautiful skin. Yet if you stand at the base of the Great Pyramid, you can still touch a few of the original casing stones that escaped this fate. These remaining blocks huddle at the very bottom, sheltered by the sands that once buried them. To run a hand over their incredibly smooth surface, still perfectly fitted after 4,500 years, is to feel the ghost of that lost brilliance, a tangible connection to the day the last stone was set and the pyramid shone complete for the very first time. Yet for all its external perfection, the pyramid's true genius is hidden in the shadows of its interior. Deep within the Great Pyramid lies a breathtaking corridor known as the Grand Gallery. This is not a simple hallway, but a soaring, corbelled vault, that climbs at the same steep angle as the pyramid's outer faces. Its walls are built in 7 overlapping layers, with each course of stone projecting slightly inward over the one below. This elegant design does far more than create a grand space. It acts as a massive structural keystone. The entire weight of the pyramid's upper layers, millions of tons of stone, presses down upon this gallery. The corbelled walls catch this colossal load and channel it outward, away from the fragile, flat-ceilinged room that lies just beyond its end, the king's chamber. Without this ingenious funnel of stone, the chamber's ceiling would have shattered instantly under the mountain of rock above it. But the builders did not stop there. Above the king's chamber, they engineered a second, even more clever system of defense. For centuries, this space was a complete secret, its entrance hidden in the darkness of the chamber's ceiling. In the late 18th century, an explorer named Nathaniel Davison, frustrated by the dead ends of known passages, noticed a narrow gap in the ceiling. He and his crew piled up rubble to reach it, and when they pushed through, they discovered not one, but 5 low, empty compartments stacked directly on top of the king's chamber. These are the relieving chambers. Their purpose was purely architectural, to act as a massive cushion. They create a buffer zone, a series of voids that further fracture and redistribute the unimaginable pressure bearing down from the pyramid's apex. Each chamber has a roof made of immense, multi-ton granite slabs, and the spaces between them ensure that any settling or shifting in the stone above would not translate directly into a crushing force on the pharaoh's final resting place below. Some Egyptologists also see a symbolic meaning in this vertical stack, viewing it as a staircase for the king's soul to ascend to the stars. Whether practical, spiritual, or both, these features represent the absolute peak of ancient engineering. They are the hidden answer to a problem of pure physics, a solution carved in stone to ensure that this man-made mountain would not collapse in upon itself, standing guard over its secret heart for millennia to come. This celestial alignment was more than just a symbolic gesture. It was the very soul of the pyramid's design. To achieve such perfect orientation, the ancient Egyptians turned their eyes to the heavens, using the stars as their ultimate guide. One of the most compelling theories suggests they used a pair of simple yet brilliant instruments called merkits. An astronomer priest would set up 2 of these forked sights, aligning them on a single circumpolar star, a star that never sets below the horizon as it rotated around the celestial pole. By marking the points where this star crossed the sight lines, they could trace a perfect north-south axis on the ground. The result is a level of precision that defies belief. The Great Pyramid's sides are aligned to the 4 cardinal directions with an error of just 1/15 of a single degree. This is not a rough approximation. It is an alignment so exact it would challenge modern surveyors with their laser equipment. But the celestial connection runs even deeper than the foundation. Look inside the Great Pyramid, at the narrow shafts that climb from the king's chamber towards the outside world. For a long time, these were thought to be simple ventilation shafts, but their true purpose appears far more profound. Egyptologists discovered that the southern shaft from the king's chamber points directly towards the center of Orion's belt. In Egyptian mythology, Orion was associated with Osiris, the god of the afterlife and rebirth. This was no accidental alignment. It creates a cosmic corridor, a pathway carved in stone intended to guide the soul of the deceased pharaoh directly to the eternal stars. The northern shaft, meanwhile, targets the circumpolar stars, which the Egyptians called the imperishable ones, the stars that never die. This alignment was a deliberate, sacred piece of engineering, fusing spiritual belief with architectural genius. It meant the pyramid was not just a tomb, but a machine for resurrection, an astronomical instrument permanently fixed to the cosmos. This intricate dance between the earthly and the celestial ensured the pyramid was not merely a building, but a perfect, eternal reflection of the universe itself. A bridge between a king and his gods that has stood unwavering for 4,500 years. This mathematical precision was carved not with complex formulas, but with a simple, brilliant ratio known as the sect. The Egyptians did not use angles as we measure them in degrees. Instead, they defined a slope by a unit of run over rise. The sect was the number of palms of horizontal distance for every 1 cubit of vertical height. For the Great Pyramid, the chosen sect appears to have been 5 palms and 2 digits, a fraction that, when calculated, produces the pyramid's iconic and nearly constant angle of approximately 52 degrees. This was not abstract geometry, it was a builder's tool. A foreman could simply hold up a set, square calibrated to this specific sect against the rising courses of stone, ensuring every single layer maintained the perfect, identical incline from base to peak. This simple, repeatable standard is what allowed for the pyramid's breathtaking consistency, a rule that could be understood and applied by thousands of workers across generations. Yet within these practical proportions, a more elegant and debated number seems to emerge, the golden ratio. If you take the pyramid's apothem, its slant height from the base corner to the summit, and divide it by half the length of its base, the result is a number incredibly close to 1.618, the golden ratio. This mathematical constant, revered for its aesthetic harmony, appears throughout nature and art. So did the Egyptians intentionally encode this divine proportion into their greatest monument. The evidence is tantalizing but inconclusive. Many scholars argue it is a beautiful coincidence, a natural byproduct of choosing a sect that resulted in a pyramid both stable and visually pleasing. The sect of 5 palms and 2 digits inherently creates a triangle whose dimensions approximate the golden ratio without the builders ever needing to know the number itself. Their genius was in their pragmatism. They used the mathematics they had, a system of simple fractions and tangible ratios, to achieve a form of sublime complexity. This practical approach to math was their true power. It allowed them to scale their designs, taking the same principles used for a small mastaba tomb and applying them to a structure of monumental scale. The pyramid's perfection was not born from secret, esoteric knowledge, but from the masterful application of everyday tools and a universally understood standard, proving that the most enduring wonders are often built on the most elegant and simple of ideas. The pyramid's perfect geometry was carved not with steel, but with the soft glow of copper. This was the cutting edge of their technology, a metal that seems impossibly weak against granite and limestone. Yet the Egyptians wielded a simple, profound secret. They paired these soft tools with one of the hardest substances on earth, ordinary sand. A copper saw blade by itself would bend and dull in moments. But when a worker added a slurry of wet sand and water as an abrasive, the dynamic changed completely. The quartz crystals in the sand, which are harder than both copper and limestone, became millions of microscopic cutting teeth. As the copper saw was dragged back and forth, it pressed these abrasive particles into the stone's surface, slowly grinding a groove. For the hardest stones like granite, they employed tubular copper drills. These were hollow reeds, likely rotated with a bow. The drill would be loaded with sand abrasive, and as it spun, the copper tube would wear away, constantly exposing fresh, sharp sand to the grinding surface. This method was not fast, but it was relentless and effective, capable of slicing through any stone given enough time and patient, skilled labor. The real logistical challenge was not the cutting, but the tools themselves. Copper chisels and saws would dull after just a few minutes of work against stone, To maintain the pace of construction, the pyramid site needed to function like a massive, open-air factory. Archaeological excavations near the Giza Plateau have uncovered the remains of these workshops, complete with furnaces, crucibles, and molds. On site, smiths worked continuously, reheating the blunted tools, hammering their edges back to a sharp finish, and recasting broken ones. This required a constant supply of fuel and raw copper, likely shipped in from mines in the Sinai Peninsula. The discovery of tool caches, with hundreds of used and re-sharpened chisels found together, paints a vivid picture of this cycle. A worker would use a chisel until it was too soft or misshapen to function, then trade it at a workshop for a newly sharpened one, while the smith behind him began the process of repair all over again. This was a symphony of organized, repetitive labor, where the softness of copper was overcome not by a single miracle alloy, but by an unending, rhythmic process of renewal, a testament to a civilization that understood its materials and mastered them through sheer, sustained human effort. The true genius of Egyptian engineering often lies in the simplest of observations. A single detail from a tomb painting at the tomb of Jehoshaphat reveals a secret that may have unlocked the entire logistics of pyramid building. The scene shows a colossal alabaster statue, taller than 3 men, being hauled on a massive wooden sledge. Teams of laborers strain against ropes, but one figure stands out, a man positioned at the front of the sledge, ceremoniously pouring a liquid from a vessel directly onto the sand in the path of the runners. For generations, this was interpreted as a purely ritual act, a libation to the gods for a safe journey. But modern physics suggests this was something far more practical, a brilliant application of everyday science. The liquid was almost certainly water, and the act was not ceremonial, but a critical engineering technique. Dry sand behaves in a stubborn way. As a heavy sledge is pulled, grains of sand pile up in front of the runners, creating a growing, immovable berm that acts like a brake. Wet sand, however, undergoes a dramatic transformation. When you add just the right amount of water, it creates tiny bridges between the individual sand grains. These capillary bonds lock the grains together, preventing them from piling up. The wet surface becomes firm and slick, almost like a hard-packed dirt road, dramatically reducing the friction the pullers need to overcome. Laboratory experiments have quantified this effect, showing that wetting desert sand can cut the required pulling force by as much as 50%. This simple trick of pouring water would have turned an impossible task into a manageable one, allowing a team of workers to move a multi-ton block with roughly half the effort. It was a low-tech solution of breathtaking elegance, turning the desert itself from an adversary into an ally. This single innovation, depicted so clearly yet misunderstood for so long, underscores a central theme of the pyramid's construction, that monumental achievements were built not on magic, but on a profound and practical understanding of the natural world. The bent pyramid at Dosha stands as a permanent record of a brilliant mistake. Under Pharaoh Sneferu, the father of Khufu who built the Great Pyramid, architects embarked on creating a true smooth-sided pyramid, but their ambition outpaced their experience. The structure began to rise at a daring, steep angle of approximately 54 degrees. As the mass of stone grew, however, the immense weight began to create unstable pressure within the core. Cracks likely started to appear in the internal chambers, a terrifying sign of impending collapse. The builders were faced with a monumental crisis, a project that was literally breaking under its own ambition. Their solution was not to abandon it, but to adapt instantly. Midway up, they made a dramatic and visible change, reducing the angle to a much gentler 43 degrees for all the remaining courses. This is why the pyramid appears to bend inwards, as if the top is sinking into the base. It was not an aesthetic choice, but a life-saving intervention for the structure. This pragmatic shift in geometry distributed the weight more safely, ensuring the pyramid would stand for millennia instead of crumbling into a ruin. The evidence for this instability is still locked in the stone. Archaeologists have found that the internal chambers were reinforced with cedar wood beams, a desperate attempt to brace the walls from the crushing forces, a temporary fix for a problem that required a complete redesign of the exterior. The bent pyramid is therefore a snapshot of ancient engineering in real time, a testament to the Egyptians' ability to diagnose a problem and execute a radical solution on a colossal scale. This perceived failure became the most important lesson in their entire architectural history. The knowledge gained from this near disaster was direct and brutal. A steep angle creates dangerous internal stresses. For Sneferu's very next project, the Red Pyramid just over a mile away, the architects applied their hard-won wisdom, choosing a consistently shallow angle from the very beginning. The Red Pyramid rose without a bend, becoming the first successful true smooth-sided pyramid in Egypt. The bent pyramid was not a dead end, but a vital prototype, a full-scale laboratory experiment that taught them the limits of their materials and the absolute necessity of stable geometry. Without this crucial visible stumble at Dosha, the perfect, unwavering slopes of the Great Pyramid at Giza might never have been achieved. A mile from the troubled bent pyramid, a new form rose from the desert, a testament to lessons learned in stone. The Red Pyramid, also built by the tireless pharaoh Sneferu, stands as the world's first successful true smooth-sided pyramid. Its name comes from the ruddy hue of the local limestone used in its core, a warm rust-colored stone that gives the entire structure a fiery glow at sunrise and sunset. This was not a cautious follow-up, but a confident declaration. Having witnessed the instability of a steep angle at the bent pyramid, Sneferu's architects applied their hard-won knowledge with unwavering consistency. They chose a single, stable angle of 43 degrees from the very base to the apex, a shallower slope that distributed the immense weight safely and prevented the internal crises that had nearly doomed its predecessor. This perfect, unbroken geometry was the ultimate proof of concept, the final piece of the puzzle that made the Giza pyramids possible. The construction itself was a marvel of logistics, using over 1 million cubic meters of stone, yet it felt almost efficient compared to the frantic mid-course corrections of the bent pyramid. Inside, the innovation continued. The Red Pyramid contains 3 successive chambers, all connected by a single narrow corridor. The final 2 chambers are breathtaking examples of early corbelling, their walls built in stepped layers that gradually close in to form a pointed roof. This was a crucial development, a direct architectural ancestor to the magnificent Grand Gallery in the Great Pyramid. It served a dual purpose, creating a grand, tall space for the pharaoh's journey, while also managing the structural loads from the mountain of stone above. The Red Pyramid was the culmination of Sneferu's lifelong ambition, and it proved beyond any doubt that the Egyptians now possessed a complete and reliable blueprint for building on a colossal scale. It was the direct and indispensable predecessor to the wonders of Giza, the final, successful prototype that gave Khufu the confidence to reach for the sky. The Great Pyramid of Giza represents the absolute pinnacle of this ancient architectural evolution. Built for Pharaoh Khufu, it is a structure of such staggering scale that it still defies comprehension. Its 2,300,000 blocks of stone, each averaging 2.5 tons, create a mass so immense that it remained the tallest man-made structure on Earth for nearly 4,000 years. This was not merely a larger pyramid, it was a quantum leap in ambition and precision. a project that likely evolved and adapted over its estimated 20-year construction period. The clues to this sophisticated, living design are hidden within its unique internal anatomy. The journey inside begins with a steeply sloping descending passage, hewn directly into the bedrock, leading deep underground to a mysterious, unfinished chamber. But the pyramid's true genius is revealed in a later, critical change of plan. The decision to create an ascending passage that branches off to lead upwards into the heart of the stone mountain. This shift in the architectural blueprint, sealed by massive granite blocking stones, suggests the builders refined their vision for the king's afterlife journey while the work was already underway. This ascending corridor then erupts into the breathtaking Grand Gallery, a soaring, corbelled hallway that climbs at the same sharp angle as the pyramid's outer faces. More than just a passage, this gallery is a masterpiece of structural engineering. Its overlapping walls designed to channel millions of tons of crushing weight safely away from the fragile chamber it leads to. At the top of the gallery lies the king's chamber, a room built entirely from immense blocks of red granite shipped from distant Aswan. Its stark, austere beauty holds a single, lidless sarcophagus, a vessel for the pharaoh's eternal remains. Yet another space, known traditionally as the Queen's Chamber, sits lower down, its purpose still debated by Egyptologists. It may have been intended as a serdab, a chamber for the king's statue, or perhaps it was part of an earlier, abandoned plan for the burial suite. This intricate internal layout, with its multiple passages and chambers, reflects a design of profound complexity, a far cry from the simple, single-chambered tombs of the past. To coordinate this, a workforce of thousands labored not as slaves, but as a rotating national service force, a testament to a bureaucracy powerful enough to feed, house, and direct this human river for a generation. The supply chain stretched to every corner of Egypt, from the granite quarries in the south to the copper mines of the Sinai, all flowing towards the Giza Plateau in a continuous, organized torrent. The Great Pyramid was more than a tomb. It was the ultimate expression of a state operating at its absolute peak. A nation's entire identity and resources poured into a single, perfect, geometric mountain destined to touch the sky. Rising beside its more famous neighbor, the Pyramid of Khafre creates a powerful illusion of dominance. Though actually slightly smaller in total height than the Great Pyramid of Khufu, it stands on a bedrock foundation that is 33 feet higher, making its peak the tallest point on the Giza Plateau. This visual trick was amplified by its original finish. While Khufu's pyramid lost nearly all of its smooth white casing, Khafre's still wears its original cap, a set of gleaming Chora limestone blocks that crown its summit. To stand before it is to see a ghost of the complex's original splendor, a glimpse of the sharp, geometric peaks that once pierced the Egyptian sky. The architectural ingenuity, however, extends far beyond this clever positioning. The builders of Khafre's pyramid embraced the landscape itself, incorporating a massive natural rock outcrop directly into the monument's core. This was a masterstroke of practical engineering. By using this solid bedrock as the pyramid's heart, they saved an immense amount of quarried stone, significantly reducing both construction time and the labor required to haul materials. It was a brilliant compromise between ambition and efficiency, using the Earth's own strength to support their man-made mountain. The internal layout is a labyrinth of purpose. Unlike the single entrance of the Great Pyramid, Khafre's monument has two separate entrance passages. One opens high on the northern face, while another, more unusual entryway is set directly into the pavement at the pyramid's base, not in the stonework above. This lower passage descends into a stark, unfinished subterranean chamber, carved deep into the bedrock. a space that feels raw and primordial compared to the polished rooms above. This dual-level design hints at a complex, evolving funerary ritual, perhaps with different stages of the burial process assigned to different symbolic depths within the earth and the structure. But the pyramid was never meant to be viewed in isolation. It was the centerpiece of a perfectly integrated sacred machine, connected by a long, covered causeway to the magnificent Valley Temple. This temple, built from colossal blocks of granite and alabaster, was where the pharaoh's body would have been received and purified. And standing guard over the entire complex is the Great Sphinx, a colossal lion with the face of Khafre himself, carved from a single ridge of limestone that remained after quarrying stone for the pyramid. The Sphinx is not a separate monument. It is the spiritual sentinel for Khafre's entire funerary estate. Together, the pyramid, the causeway, the Valley Temple, and the Sphinx formed a single unified religious statement in stone. A landscape designed to facilitate the king's transformation from a mortal ruler into an eternal, divine being. This holistic vision shows a civilization at the height of its creative and spiritual power, seamlessly weaving architecture, geology, and belief into one enduring legacy. Completing the sacred skyline of Giza, the Pyramid of Menkora stands as the final and smallest of the trio. Its reduced scale speaks volumes, marking a clear departure from the overwhelming ambition of its predecessors. Where Khufu's pyramid soared and Khafre's cleverly dominated the plateau, Menkora's monument presents a more restrained vision. The lower third of the pyramid is clad in massive, rugged blocks of red granite, a stone far harder and more difficult to quarry and shape than the limestone used for the upper sections and the earlier pyramids. This choice of material is a puzzle. Was it a deliberate shift towards a more durable, prestigious finish? Or was it a sign of something else? A need to use what was readily available as resources became stretched. The granite itself tells a story of immense effort for a smaller reward, hinting that the golden age of limitless state expenditure might have been waning. This impression of a project under pressure is reinforced by the pyramid's surroundings. Its mortuary temple, connected by a long causeway, is surprisingly complex and well built, but the pyramid's own casing was never finished. Many of the smooth limestone blocks, intended to cover the upper sections, remain as rough, protruding bosses, left unfinished by the stonemasons. This suggests a race against time, a project abruptly halted. The most likely explanation is that Menkora's reign was cut short, leaving his successor, Shepsiskaf, with the duty of completing the burial complex as quickly as possible. He would have focused on the essential elements to make the tomb functional for the king's afterlife, leaving the cosmetic perfection of the exterior as a secondary concern. Menkora's pyramid, therefore, is more than just a smaller tomb. It is a stone ledger recording a shift in the Egyptian economy and the concentration of pharaonic power. The era of dedicating a nation's entire output for decades to a single, sky-piercing monument was coming to a close. After the Fourth Dynasty, no Egyptian king would ever build on the colossal scale of Giza again. The priorities of the state were evolving, with power and resources perhaps flowing towards the sun temples of the Fifth Dynasty and other expressions of royal authority. This last pyramid of the Giza trio is a silent testament to the end of an epoch, a magnificent yet diminished echo of our ambition that once reached for the stars themselves. This immense workforce, thousands strong, required a supply chain as monumental as the pyramid itself. The logistical operation to feed and water this army of laborers stands as one of the ancient world's most staggering administrative achievements. At the height El Ghurab workers' city, archaeologists have uncovered the physical evidence of this machine. Massive bakeries with rows of clay ovens capable of producing many thousands of loaves of bread every single day. The diet was surprisingly protein-rich, with huge quantities of fish from the Nile, salted and preserved for transport, alongside cuts of beef and mutton from state-managed herds. This was not subsistence fare. It was fuel for the most demanding physical labor, deliberately planned to keep the workforce healthy and strong. The entire system was perfectly synchronized with the rhythm of the Nile River. Each year the river would flood, covering the farmland in a layer of fertile silt. For 3 months, the fields were under water and farming was impossible. This was not a disaster. It was the engine of the pyramid's labor force. During this annual inundation, the farmers of Egypt were temporarily freed from their agricultural duties. They became builders, rotating in for seasonal shifts at the pyramid site. This brilliant system solved 2 problems at once. It provided a massive, recurring labor force for construction, without crippling the country's vital agricultural production. The state did not just organize people. It mastered the flow of goods. The same river that flooded the fields also became the nation's primary highway. Barges laden with grain, pottery, and other supplies from distant provinces could sail directly to the harbors at the base of the Giza Plateau. Centralized storage facilities, vast mudbrick granaries and warehouses, acted as the beating heart of this operation, stockpiling resources to ensure a constant, uninterrupted supply. The Pyramid Project was, at its core, a colossal exercise in administration and supply chain management, a testament to a bureaucracy sophisticated enough to calculate the daily bread ration for tens of thousands of people, and then deliver it day after day for generations. Every stone in the pyramid was a prayer in solid form. This geometric mountain was never intended as a simple tomb, but as a divine engine for resurrection, a machine designed to launch the soul of the pharaoh into eternity. Its very shape was a sacred symbol, representing the primordial mound of creation, the first land that emerged from the waters of chaos at the dawn of time. By being buried within this man-made Ben-Ben, the king was reenacting the moment of creation itself, ensuring his own rebirth just as the world was once born. The pyramid was his launchpad to the stars, a ramp for his spirit to ascend and join the sun god Ra in his eternal cycle across the sky. This celestial connection was engineered directly into the architecture. The narrow shafts pointing to Orion's belt and the circumpolar stars were not just symbolic. They were functional cosmic corridors. They provided a direct path for the king's Ba, or soul, to travel to the imperishable, undying stars, securing his place among the gods. This spiritual purpose was made explicit in the pyramids that followed. Inside the burial chambers of 5th Dynasty pyramids, the walls are covered in hieroglyphs known as the pyramid texts. These are not historical records, but the oldest collection of religious spells ever discovered. They are a detailed guidebook for the afterlife, a collection of incantations meant to protect the pharaoh from dangers, to provide him with sustenance, and to literally spell out the words he must speak to navigate the divine realm. One spell might command the stones of the pyramid itself to not block his path, while another would ensure he could transform into a bird to fly up to the heavens. This was the ultimate justification for the staggering national effort. The construction was the most profound religious act the state could perform. Every laborer hauling a sledge, every mason setting a block, was participating in a ritual that sustained cosmic order. Their work maintained Mot, the fundamental principle of truth, balance, and harmony that held the universe together. The pyramid was a national project to ensure the sun would rise, the Nile would flood, and life would continue, all facilitated by the successful rebirth of their divine king. The precision, the alignment, the immense cost, It was all imbued with this spiritual meaning, transforming raw stone into a vessel of eternal hope. The perfect geometry of the pyramids has sparked wild theories of vanished super-civilizations, or even alien architects. These ideas propose that such precision must be the work of technologies beyond our understanding, or beings from beyond our world. Yet the evidence for a purely human achievement is overwhelming, written not in speculation, but in the stone and sand of Egypt itself. We have the quarries, littered with thousands of failed blocks, and the simple stone tools used to shape them. We have the worker settlements, with their bakeries and medical facilities, proving a vast, organized human society was dedicated to this task. The very precision these theories point to is not a mystery, but a documented outcome of the Egyptians' masterful use of simple physics. The sand and water trick for moving sledges, the abrasive slurry of sand and copper for cutting granite, the meticulous star alignments with a merkit, these are not lost technologies. They are the brilliant, cumulative result of generations of human observation, trial, and error. The so-called mystery of the pyramids evaporates when you replace the myth of aliens with the reality of the Egyptian state's immense organizational power and the quiet, persistent ingenuity of its people. This is the true wonder, a story not of magic wands or laser beams, but of calloused hands and brilliant minds solving problems on a monumental scale. It is a testament to what humanity can achieve through sheer perseverance and collective effort, a legacy far more inspiring than any fiction. The age of the pyramid builders could not last forever. The sheer cost of these stone mountains, in both resources and human effort, slowly bled the Egyptian state dry. Pharaohs like Khufu and Khafre commanded a level of centralized power that was almost absolute, authority strong enough to divert the entire nation's output towards a single glorious goal for a generation. But that kind of power is fragile. As the old kingdom drew to a close, a combination of factors eroded the pharaoh's divine authority. The royal court and the priesthood grew wealthier and more independent, challenging the king's monopoly on power and the resources needed for another Giza. The state's ability to command a national workforce, that brilliant system of rotating farmers, began to crumble from within. At the same time, the environment itself seemed to turn against them. Evidence from ancient climate records points to a prolonged period of lower Nile floods. A weak inundation meant poor harvests, which meant famine, social unrest, and an empty treasury. How could a pharaoh demand tens of thousands of workers for his pyramid when his people were starving in their villages? The economic and spiritual foundation of the pyramid was cracking. This shift in religious focus was just as profound. The pyramid, for all its grandeur, had a fatal flaw. It was a giant beacon for tomb robbers. Its very prominence made it a target. For all the hidden passages and blocking stones, nearly every royal pyramid was plundered in antiquity. The promise of eternal life was broken when your mummy was stripped and cast aside. The solution was a complete change in strategy, a move from towering monuments to hidden crypts. The pharaohs of the New Kingdom abandoned the desert plateaus near Memphis entirely. They established a new royal burial ground hundreds of miles to the south, in a desolate, easily guarded valley near Thebes, the Valley of the Kings. Here, the architecture turned inward. Instead of building up, they carved down, tunneling deep into the heart of the limestone cliffs to create elaborate, labyrinthine tombs. This was a dramatic evolution in security and spirituality. A pyramid announced its presence to the world, but a rock-cut tomb was designed to disappear. The entrance would be sealed, covered with rubble, and its location kept a closely guarded secret by a special community of necropolis workers. The religious texts that once adorned the hidden chambers of pyramids were now expanded into entire books of the dead, painted on the tomb walls to guide the pharaoh through the underworld. This transition from external grandeur to internal hiddenness marks one of the most significant pivots in Egyptian history. It shows us that even the most iconic traditions are not immune to the relentless pressures of a changing world, where shifting sands could topple not just monuments, but entire eras of human ambition. That same spirit of human ingenuity is now being channeled into modern workshops and high-tech laboratories. Archaeologists and engineers are no longer content with just studying the pyramids. They are actively trying to build them. One of the most ambitious experiments was led by Egyptologist Mark Lehner, who set out with a team to construct a small, 6-meter-high pyramid using only the tools and techniques available to the ancient Egyptians. They quarried the stone with dolerite hammers and copper chisels, experiencing firsthand how quickly the soft metal tools blunted and needed constant resharpening. They moved the blocks on wooden sledges, testing the theory of wetting the sand and confirming that the required pulling force was indeed cut in half. Perhaps most importantly, they experimented with ramp designs, discovering that a straight ramp for the lower courses and a spiraling ramp for the upper sections was not only feasible, but highly efficient. This hands-on project provided tangible data on the true scale of the labor, suggesting that a workforce of thousands, not tens of thousands, could have achieved the monumental task over 2 decades, transforming vague estimates into numbers grounded in physical experience. Alongside these physical reconstructions, digital technology is opening a new window into the pyramid's secrets without ever touching a stone. Researchers are now using 3-dimensional modeling to simulate the entire construction process, inputting variables like ramp angles and labor force size to see which methods are most viable. Even more revolutionary is the use of non-invasive scanning. Teams have employed muon radiography, a technique that uses cosmic rays from space to peer deep inside solid rock, much like a medical X-ray scans the human body. These muons pass through empty spaces more easily than through dense stone, allowing scientists to map the internal structure. This is how, in 2017, the Scan Pyramids project made a stunning announcement. They had discovered a large, previously unknown void deep within the Great Pyramid, located above the Grand Gallery. This was not a small passage, but a chamber or space the length of a commercial airliner, a hidden feature that had remained completely undetected for 4,500 years. These contemporary approaches represent a powerful fusion of archaeology and engineering. The mystery of the pyramids is no longer confined to dusty scrolls and measuring tapes. It is being solved with computer simulations, particle physics, and raw, hands-on labor. Each experiment and every scan adds another piece to the puzzle, continuously refining our understanding. They confirm the brilliance of simple physics while simultaneously revealing that these ancient structures still hold profound secrets. The story of how the pyramids were built is not a closed book, but a living, breathing investigation where every new answer seems to raise another tantalizing question, ensuring that our fascination with these geometric mountains will never truly fade. The pyramids of Giza are the ultimate proof of what humanity can achieve with simple tools and brilliant minds. They were not built by a lost super-civilization or by visitors from the stars, but by a society that mastered the art of organization, turning the collective effort of thousands into a legacy of stone that has endured for 4,500 years. This was a triumph of human creativity, a perfect marriage of practical engineering and spiritual vision, all accomplished with copper chisels, stone hammers, and an unwavering collective will. While certain puzzles remain, like the exact configuration of the final ramps, or the complete depth of their symbolic meanings, each new discovery only reinforces the incredible capabilities of the ancient Egyptians. They teach us a profound lesson about our own potential, showing that the greatest wonders are not born from magic, but from persistence, ingenuity, and the power of a shared goal. We would love to hear what you think. What is your favorite theory about the pyramids? Or which part of their construction amazes you the most? Let us know in the comments. If you enjoyed unraveling this ancient mystery with us, please subscribe for more journeys into the incredible stories of our past. Thank you for watching, and never stop exploring the wonders left behind by those who came before us.